Welcome back to the Messy City podcast. This is Kevin Klinkenberg. Got my good buddy Eric Brown with me today. Eric is architect, urban designer, man about town, Savanian. What else should I have on your resume, Eric?
Probably my best accomplishment, which is being a father.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, I'm in that with you now as well. Although I was a little later to the party than you, but it's a pretty awesome responsibility, and I know Nick's a great kid, so congratulations on that.
Well, you haven't seen him in a while. He's 6'1" now.
Jesus, he's taller than me.
He's
That's not possible.
He's still growing too. He's a big boy. He's gonna be a big boy, and you also haven't seen Ace the Wonder Dog.
Yeah, I know. It's been a couple years since I've been back. Although, watch out, rumor is we're gonna make a trip back this year, so I'll let you know.
Okay.
So I wanted to. There's a lot of things Eric and I talk about, and there's any number of directions we can go with this hour today. But I do want to hit a couple of things specific to like what stuff that you work on, and some things that we did years ago. Eric and I were kind of partners in crime in Savannah, really trying to bring more discussion about new urbanism and better long-term planning to the city. And that may seem like a strange thing because Savannah's famous for its planning and its built environment. But like a lot of cities in the last several decades, it's really just been kind of the default same stuff that you see everywhere other than the historic district. So one of the things that Eric and I kind of put our heads together on was to get a group together and do an updated master plan of sorts for the greater downtown area of Savannah. We did this in 2018. We called it the Savannah 2033 plan. And we called it 2033 because not just because it was like 15 years was a nice round number away, but really because 2033 is the 300th anniversary of the founding of Savannah. And Savannah is actually older than the United States as a country. So it felt like a great benchmark for us to give. And I flew the coop a few years ago, so I haven't been in touch in Savannah with as much of what's going on. But I wondered, Eric, if you could talk a little bit about that plan and effort and any legacies from that, and what might be going on today, sort of good, bad, or indifferent, regards to thinking about planning in downtown Savannah.
It's a good question, and I'm going to kind of circle back to that answer in a second, but we also, you and I also kind of had our little C&U group here, brought the Congress here in whatever year that was. But as part of that C&U group, we did a series of urban speaker series.
Mm-hmm.
We had Mayor Riley, we had Diru Tadani, we had Rick Hall,
Chuck Marone,
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
We had the top talent, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a few on there. And when I'm really kind of proud of our efforts, even after all these years, because people still talk about that. They still talk about those. And if you were listening to you and I back in 2018 or 17 or whenever that was, we were doing those 19. Our mission, what we told everybody our mission is to raise the bar of discourse and education here on urban planning matters. And I got to say, buddy, congratulations, because it took a while to sink in, but we did it. You
Well,
know,
things move a little more slowly in Savannah, right?
absolutely they move slow.
Although honestly, they move slowly everywhere. So what are you gonna do?
But I've seen um, the effects of some of those, and I think we've given people the vocabulary and, in some cases, passion to go deal with some of these issues. Um, some of our elected officials, some of our staff members, and so I just wanted to kind of tell you that all those efforts that were pretty much thankless at the time are still somewhat thankless, but we did do it. We
Hmm.
had an effect on that. So again, I'm real proud of you and our efforts on there. Um, so I wanted to throw that out there.
That's great to hear.
There's some significant changes coming that I really can't mention. I really don't think it's appropriate to mention right now. But when they do occur, you'll you'll be shocked and you'll know exactly how much of an effect we had.
Mhm.
And so I think that's exciting to see if that does come to fruition. And everyone out there in podcast land, because I've talked to other CNU groups about doing this, or those grassroots education efforts. They are thankless. Just they're important though. It's
Hmm.
really the most important thing I think you can do as a local group. So hammer away at that stuff because it does bear fruit. Um,
Yeah.
but back to your planning question, that master plan was really good work. That our team, just did some really amazing work in a very short time for what we were doing.
On a shoestring too. I
Oof.
mean, we did that on a ridiculous budget. So
Yeah, yeah, we did.
I
But
mean, you and basically everybody else, donated huge amounts of time, or else it never would have gotten done.
well, I think it's kind of the same thing. We did get city council to adopt that
Hmm.
as their guide. Um, I don't know that they have ever gone back and looked at it since then, but it has spurned off and affected a lot of things. The Tide to Town has been a success here,
Hmm.
which is kind of linking up some bike trails with some of our canals. Savannah's got a lot of canals and waterways, and kind of tying all those together so that you can really get somewhere substantial on a bike that's in a nice, interesting setting. You're not sharing the road with automobiles.
Hmm.
Um, so that's just they just got more funding for their next phase. It's a huge success story, and that's probably the biggest one that came out of that effort. Um, there's continuing work with the Civic Center, which is one of the focal points of that plan, and the work we put in there is a good kind of milestone, I think, to judge the future work by.
Hmm.
Um, and the Waters corridor has finished up, and it looks really nice. I was over there the other day, um, and so those efforts kind of helped that area a little bit, which was part of the East Side charrette as well, from the Congress.
Yeah. One of the things we used to talk about, Eric, it kind of, I may help people to have some context to know that this was basically a planning effort that we put together that was outside City Hall. Um, we worked kind of through the remnants of Savannah Development and Renewal Authority, but we also went out and raised money privately and pieced it together. And that was something like you and I used to talk about that all the time. How I wonder if you could just expand on this. that one of the frustrations we have is that in so many cities, the business community and people who ought to know better about development and um, things that would work well, at least financially in a city, the business community largely has kind of stepped away from being involved in planning, and we used to just it's something we kind of wrung our hands about all the time. Even in a great historic city like Savannah, that was often the case. But clearly, cities all over the country, um, it, it's just been a sea change in how people think about that. And so I wonder if you could kind of share some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I'm a I'm a big history buff, history fan,
Hmm.
um, as it relates to planning, but just in general. And when you look at some of the great plans that have been done, the um, the plan for San Francisco, the plan for Chicago, um, heck, even the 1815 plan for Manhattan. Um, it wasn't the city of Chicago didn't do that plan. It was the business community that wrote Dan Burnham an unlimited check to go get it done, make us a world class city. And San Francisco did the same thing.
Hmm.
It's because the business community needed a competitive city to be competitive in an emerging national market, and um, never in our history until probably, I would guess, post war, or maybe probably during the Depression, it started where you started to rely on government agencies to do the planning work.
Hmm.
Because there was no planning profession prior to like 19 something, 1912 maybe.
Right.
Um, and so that's interesting. Again, how we used to do it, and not I sound like an old man, get off my lawn kind of thing, but it worked, and those were beautiful plans, and they've stood the test of time. They've built magnificent world class cities.
Hmm.
Chicago's a top three, top five U.S. city, however you want to rank it. San Francisco, same. So you know, so where's our business community? Was the question you and I kind of asked ourselves over some beverages, I think one or two nights, and it's it's different. It's different now, and I don't think we realized this at the time. But let's say in 1893, the business community in Chicago, and you had some national, obviously Sears was based. I think Sears was based out of there at the
Hmm.
time, and you had some national companies, but you know businesses were for the most part locally owned,
Yeah.
right? So you had the department store that was locally owned. It wasn't a Macy's yet.
Right.
Um, it wasn't a Woolworths yet. There were locally owned businesses that did things, steel mills, building cars or mufflers or whatever it was, um, and all that's gone. Literally, that whole class
Hmm.
of independent businessmen that are locally based and care about where they actually are and where they live and how their kids are going to view all this, those guys are gone, and they're replaced with global corporate MBA dipshits that just care about stock price.
Yeah.
And so they're running a global company out of somewhere, and it's real hard to get them to do anything, other than for the PR work. And
Yep.
raising funds for CNU, I think we got a taste of that. But what was interesting is, Delta's based out of Atlanta, Chick-fil-A's based out of Atlanta, and so they were willing to fund some efforts, in their home market. They perceived it as. So we got lucky with a few of those, but you know, um, Gulfstream here is one of our few major businesses in Savannah, and they do a ton in the community. They do, um, but they don't give two shits about the planning work here.
Yeah.
It's just not on their radar. So I think that that whole shift is something to be cognizant of, and you you have to find kind of that civic leadership somewhere else.
Hmm.
And by all means, if you have a local based business, then lean on them. They're just not that prevalent like they used to be. Um, Before we relied on the city. Here we have obviously tourism groups that are interested in the planning. Um, so they provide some of that leadership, right or wrong. And I think you have to, as as like what we were doing is basically, guerrilla warfare. I always viewed it as, working outside the system because the system isn't getting it done. We were trying to model our efforts on, what some of the great planners before us, Daniel Burnham and them, were doing, um, and engage that business community. And, we found some success here. And so for, people that might be trying that same thing, you know, I would do some research into, where some of the capital or trusts are, in your city. Those are usually good sources for, funding efforts to do stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was thinking about like, even here in Kansas City, we had a great city beautiful plan, like a lot of American cities did,
Mm-hmm.
starting sort of 1880s and all the way through the 19 teens. And that it's interesting that there's a couple of great books that talk about how the creation of like the Parks and Boulevards plan here. And there was a core group of local business people, including the newspaper publisher, that basically went around town and lobbied for that thing to happen. They hired a famous landscape architect at the time, George Kessler, who was an Olmsted disciple, and they basically, went around and lobbied to make sure it would happen. And over 100 years later, that's as big a part of what the city is known for as anything for people who come here and see it. You can see the Parks and Boulevard footprint, and I mean that's pretty common all over the place. I think you make a great point too about just like the local civic leadership in like. Do you ever think about that, like in your compared to your native Ohio? Um, so Eric grew up in Ohio, and Ohio is interesting because let's say 70, 80 years ago there was unbelievable wealth and industry and local leadership and great cities that were built as a result, great architecture. But it's probably suffered as much as any place with a lot of those companies becoming part of what you described. Like they all eventually got absorbed and combined and merged or dissolved. And there's not as much of that like local civic leadership as there probably was.
No, no, it's not. All those Rust Belt cities. Pittsburgh's actually probably the best example of a city that was able to pivot quickly, in part because they have, um, a variety of higher learning institutions there that really help them, become a research center in many ways and survive the shift away from making steel.
Hmm.
Um, and um, Cleveland in 1920 was a top five city. It was number 4 or 5 city in America in terms of population. Um, and it fell off a cliff there. It's still a big city, but it's a skeleton of itself. Everybody lives in the burbs mostly.
Hmm.
They don't make Cleveland never made cars or they made some steel, but they made a lot of the stuff that went into cars, mufflers, transmissions, engines, all sorts of that stuff, and some steel. But all a lot of that's gone. Not all of it, but most of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think those grassroots efforts to find you know better planning and better design work and expecting better. I think it needs to start with somebody in the community. If that business community is not there, then um, maybe it's a neighborhood association or downtown
Hmm.
association or somebody needs to start it. And I think just follow that path of educating and doing some demonstrative projects, which I know you've done
Hmm.
both in Kansas City and your time here in Savannah. Just showing how you can. Nobody knew what a parklet was.
Yeah.
After
So we just went out and did one.
yeah, they went out and did one, and COVID kind of opened that box in many places. Um, I think it's just, but you're fighting uphill guerrilla warfare, but it's actually easier that way because you don't have to answer anybody. You just kind of
Yeah.
do what you do, and so I really enjoyed that time we were doing that stuff here, um, and we just met. A couple of us met again here in the fall. We're going to pick up on some of that again,
Cool.
which
Cool.
is somewhat fallen off the radar here. I just haven't had the same time that I had when you and I were doing it.
Yeah. And well, and Savannah also is, I guess it's kind of unique when you think about it because it's got, they're probably more like multi generation families and people who are really invested in the place than there are in other cities in the country. We had a lot of luck with like realtors and other people who also cared about real estate value. Um, but there definitely there are some of those still like legacy families that give a damn about the place and what it's changing into for better or worse. Um, so I think and I think probably a lot of cities have that, but it felt like maybe some of those older southern cities, Savannah, Charleston, Beaufort, where he used to be, might have a little more of that than other places.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. This whole topic is really almost worth like a CNU subchapter or boot camp for guerrilla warfare or something. How to affect change in your local city.
Yeah,
That would be actually an interesting session to do because I
yeah,
get asked a lot on stuff like that.
yeah. Well, and you've also done it not just in Savannah but in Beaufort. And you were there what 14 years?
I don't remember. Yeah, a long
Yeah,
time.
something like that.
I
And
think more than that actually, but
all right.
because I'm getting old now. But yeah, and there's once you start waving the flag, people come out of the woodwork and say,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a good point, or I agree with that, or but you gotta somebody's got to light the fire.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So what else is happening in Savannah these days? What are you seeing from like a development or a design standpoint? I know when I left town, and since then, there's been a lot more like I guess what we call like large scale development east of downtown and a little bit on the west of downtown, uh, and and then we had a lot of discussions about like how do you make incremental change and make some of that missing middle stuff easier in the older neighborhoods. What are you seeing these days? And is it kind of gradual change? Does it feel like things are moving faster, or what?
um, no, it's there's if you drive over the bridge into Savannah from South Carolina, I did it the other day, and I don't know there were 13 cranes,
Mm,
You know, the amount of cranes in the air is always a good judge of what's going on. And,
Mhm.
you know, we are in that stage where we kind of are coming out of a stage where we couldn't build hotels fast enough anywhere. Um, and they've kind of run out of downtown space, although not entirely. Um, Actually, they two of the biggest buildings, you know, um, just sold to hotel companies that are going to
Hmm.
convert convert them back.
Wow.
One building used to be a hotel that sits on Johnson Square. That's going to be converted back to a hotel, so we're losing all that office space. And
Okay.
um, the one East Bryant building, which is the tallest building in Savannah, was just bought. It's going to be a Ritz Carlton.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's quite an upgrade.
Well,
It was a
yeah,
great building. So,
it's a great building. It's just it's displacing. We're losing two of the major office buildings downtown.
right.
Um, and there's a ton of hotel buildings still going on. There's a couple under construction I can see out my window here. Um, and the other thing is the large apartment building that takes up as much, it's as much of a Texas donut as you can fit on whatever site you're on.
Hmm.
So there's probably, I don't know, there's probably six, seven of those going on in various parts of
Wow.
town right now. And
Wow.
some just finished up. Um, there's several kind of over by the bridge. There's a lot on Upper Montgomery Street that are either built or coming online. That whole area is kind of marching southward.
Hmm.
Um, there's a couple infill ones over by where I live. There's two right by my house, um, and they're huge, big buildings, and the ones inside the historic district, have enough of a review process. I was walking by the one the other day, and it's got a really nice brick to it. It's got nice windows, but all the all the details are kind of crappy. They made them put brick lintel up there, but it's fake, and
Hmm.
it doesn't overhang the masonry at all. So all that little stuff that we kind of gripe about, that stuff's not 100%, but you know the building form's okay and the materials are okay. But then you look at the ones that are outside that district, and holy shit, it looks just like the Fourth Ward in Atlanta, or
Hmm.
any big city. It's that nameless, shitty architecture,
Yeah.
with the crazy colors and the rain screen bullshit and the ins and outs and the balconies and all sorts of just. You can just see the building's going to fall apart in 10 years. So we're getting some of that. Wherever they can do it, they try that. Thankfully, historic district kind of protects us from that to some degree. These are the same issues Charleston faced as well. We're usually about 7 years behind whatever Charleston's going through
Hmm.
affects us. Um, and but it's especially during COVID, all the downtown real estate in a span of 18 months doubled in value, doubled,
Hmm.
and it had already, I'll be here 10 years um, in October. Um, and everything's over four times of what it cost when I first moved here, coming up on five times.
Hmm.
So there's
And it was already kind of at a high basis by then, at that point, honestly. So,
uh, it's you know coming up on residential stuff in my neighborhoods, eight, $900 a foot,
hmm.
something like that. You know,
Yeah.
uh, which is pretty expensive.
Yeah, that's the understatement.
Um, you know, and so yeah, that's kind of what's going on here. It's really filling in, um, and the Midtown district, which is south of the historic district, south of Forsyth Park, that continues to thrive with some businesses, mostly food and beverage stuff, opening up,
Hmm.
and that neighborhood's, which is your old neighborhood,
Hmm.
that's also seen a similar bump in value,
Yeah.
which was a lot more affordable back in the day. It's be hard pressed to find something under $1 million up there now,
Mm.
or something close to that, eight 900, and tons of people, especially during COVID, they flocked here. Man, there's so many people that cashed out of, like my old neighbors were from Brooklyn,
Hmm.
sold whatever they had in Brooklyn, paid cash for whatever, and put money in their pocket.
Hmm.
So it's so cheap compared to those kind of places.
Yeah.
Still, still is. Um, but yeah, it's a big jump in population here.
Hmm.
With and it's been interesting because it's a big jump in um, people living, so that's good. And then we're still overrun with our, and most people I'm sure won't know that, but Savannah's got a hellacious take rate for Airbnbs,
Hmm.
short-term rentals. It's I've never come across anywhere that has any sort of ordinance like the one we have. It's I think it's 25% non-owner occupied, by ward, which is our neighborhood system, if you will.
Right.
So that doesn't include the owner occupied ones or the illegal ones.
Yeah.
Um, so just the economics on that math drives a lot of the Victorians were picked up as Airbnb investments by holding companies. I mean, they would sell without even looking at them, just because they can do the math, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I keep wondering when that bubble's going to burst. Feels like it's bursting nationwide in different places, the Airbnb bubble, but Savannah, Charleston, those cities are so popular. I don't know.
yeah, the tourism numbers here are ridiculous for a city of this size, honestly. And with the last round of hotels online now, and more coming, it's really overrun with tourists. It just wasn't designed to have as many people as we have here. So it's like, you know, you need reservations now to go get dinner. It's like Manhattan. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to roll in unless you find a neighborhood joint. There's a few left that you can just roll in, and you happen to know somebody and you get dinner. Otherwise, there's tourists standing in line for some of these dumb restaurants. It's like,
Hmm. Yeah, that's a new thing.
it is.
Uh, so I also want to talk a little bit about how your practice has changed over the years and like what all you're doing today. Eric's firm is Brown Design Studio. He's an architect. He's done architecture and urban design and urban planning, but probably heavier on architecture. Um, and I'm curious, so you've been doing this a couple of years now, and obviously a lot has changed from when you initially started doing like working in new urbanist communities and doing the architecture you're doing. What are you seeing today that what if anything is kind of different about your approach and what you're working on, who your clients are, that sort of thing?
Um, that's a good question. I think, and we this is our 26th year in
Hmm.
business, so we've survived, a couple minor meltdowns and one major one. Um, but our whole focus, we don't do anything that wouldn't be classified as new urbanism. Whether it's infill work or greenfield work or something in
Hmm.
between. So we're not like local architects doing whatever comes in the door locally. We work solely in new urbanist projects, across North America and a few other spots. But um, and that's what we continue to do. And so, not much has changed
Hmm.
um, in that regard. That's always what our mission was, and we're still on our. It's like the Starship Enterprise. We're on our 26-year mission to help build healthy, walkable places. Um, and it's worth it. It's been a fun challenge. Um, so we continue to do that. We have long term relations with most of our clients are developers, and you know we have some long term relationships that we're here when they need us. They know what we do, and what we're good at, what we're not good at. Um, so that's our core. That's our core right
Do
there.
you see? Do you find yourself doing more infill these days as opposed to greenfield stuff, or is that not the case?
No, it's we've always done because something that plugs in a new urbanist community also plugs in an old urbanist community.
Hmm.
You know, and so those always went hand in hand for us. But to the heart of your point, yeah, after definitely after when the market came back in like 2012, 13, whatever, 14, you know, um, definitely we're doing a lot of smaller infill projects. Some of them are pretty random. Um, we'll get a call from a guy in Michigan somewhere that wants to do 6 townhouses on a
Hmm.
urban property. His parents owned or something. It's all sorts of stuff like that, all over the place. And some bigger projects. There's still some bigger projects kind of plodding along.
Hmm.
Um, we were able to do um, a project in Oklahoma, outside Norman, in between Norman and Oklahoma City.
Hmm.
That's pretty interesting. A greenfield project. It's big, 720 acres. We did that planning work about 3 years ago, and last year we just got some finished vertical architecture done. So we're continuing to work on that project that we're real proud of, which is called Sela,
Hmm.
and it's been fun, doing the land plan, internally. A lot of times we work with some other land planners. So this one we did in house, and then with some other team members. But
Hmm.
um, it's been real fun, real rewarding, and then delivering the architecture to build it out. That's keeping us busy as well.
Hmm.
That project. But yeah, we've always somehow been known for our missing middle work. We were doing that before anybody knew what to call it, before Dan had invented that term,
Hmm.
and so that's still one of our bread and butters. We're still known for that somehow. Um, done a lot of multifamily projects, continue to do those a lot of townhouses. And what's interesting is I finally got, over the years, and I'm sure you've done this as well, where you want to take a garden apartment guy and get him to do what we want him to do, right? And I've failed
Hmm.
probably. I'm now like 1 in 17. So I've got one that I got to actually do it. Um, that's not totally true, but this was a big, 350 unit project, and we got him to build it out of, 4, 6, 8, and 12 pack units,
Cool.
and um, it's under construction right now. So that was interesting. I think that's going to be a good case study going forward, um, because his rent, I'm anxious to see how his rents compete. It's in a a decent walkable community, so I'm interested to see how the financial case study works out.
Where's that one?
That one's in Bluffton, actually, which is
Okay, cool.
um, across the river in South Carolina.
Hmm.
Near, for people who don't know, it's near Hilton Head.
Hmm. How
Um,
have how have the conversations changed, like with builders and developers, like since the early days of doing this stuff? Um, did you have to do a lot more like arm twisting early on when with some of your early clients? I mean, is it an easier sell now to do the kind of work that you want to do?
well, no, it's not. It's the same cell. However, you know, I'm not the smartest guy, but I eventually learned to stop chasing those clients. So, I don't waste my time with them. If you want to
Yeah,
do something else, have fun. Here, I'll give you
yeah.
some names of people to call. We can't help you, because I don't give a shit.
Hmm.
If you want to go do some 5-car garage houses somewhere, go have fun. Um, but so we only take on projects that you know are in line with our vision, our mission, and that's just what I learned to do. Be
Yeah,
selective about who we're going to work for, because we don't want to do everything. We only want to do something that helps our mission, which is building great communities. And if we're in alignment, when people do call us, we're going to run through a wall for them.
yeah.
We believe in what we do every day, and so I guess I got smarter is what happened.
I remember a lot of those conversations too. Like, my God, we went through trying to convince so many crappy builders and developers to do something better. And
And what was your and I did the same thing, man.
yeah,
We were both young. I have similar backgrounds, and had young companies, and we're young men,
hmm,
dumb young, idealistic young men probably. But
yeah.
what was your success rate on that?
Oh, almost zero.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like me with these apartment guys. I finally got one, a big one, to do it. We've
yeah.
done lots of little ones, but to get a 350 unit thing, that was a big win. But it took me 20 some years to do it. So that's not a good use of my time.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is in my victory that I'm kind of patting myself on the back about there with the apartment. They wouldn't have come to me if they didn't get rejected prior, because it was they had to conform with a form based code that we happen to write.
Hmm.
And so that's how, otherwise they would have just happily built their normal shitty garden apartment thing.
Hmm.
So that code reform is still critically important, part of our world, because you really, convincing someone, to do what we would term the right thing versus, what they're planning on doing, it's a low percentage
Yeah.
win rate for anybody. I don't care how good you are, as a closer or whatever. But and it's just it's a waste of all of our time and efforts, because it burns you out because you lose so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think our efforts would be better spent into guerrilla warfare to get the codes changed so that these developers now have to start doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And then
And find and nurturing like other younger developers who want to do something different. Helping bring them along. Um,
yeah, for sure. But a lot of these projects, are still the big boy.
yeah.
You need $40 million in
Yep.
capital to tackle, and
Hmm.
you know those guys. I love the small incremental stuff, and we do a lot of that. Um, but it's like you're talking about the market share of like a Bugatti versus, Volkswagen or something like
Yeah.
that. You got to change Volkswagen. You got to change the mass market. Um, and so I think that guerrilla warfare into code reform at a local level is something that we don't advocate enough for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which goes way back to our start of our conversation. Um, so I think that's, if I could do something besides outlawing traffic engineers, um, that would be one of the things is, push us on this code reform where everybody's, working off some type of form based code.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because even after working in that world for almost 30 years or whatever, we've seen some good efforts with code reform and some good efforts with regulatory reform, but there are a lot of days where it feels like we've made zero progress, uh, depending
And
on where you're working.
it is, it's, and I've, you know, like the analogy is you're, somebody's spending all sorts of time and effort to build stuff downtown here. Great. And we're trying to, expand downtown even, which is a awesome thing that we're able to do here a little bit, expand your urban core. Meanwhile, out in our suburbs, they're happily building, Costco's and Targets and all sorts of,
Mhm.
bullshit subdivisions. And it's like, we don't learn. And
Yeah.
we don't learn. And, some of the strong town stuff is, makes so much sense when you look at the, how the life cycle of those suburbs. And it's funny because, poolers now, after spending, all sorts of money on all sorts of great police stations and city halls and all this stuff, now all of a sudden, they've got funding is different,
Yeah.
and it's just so funny because they're hitting that 7 year curve on a lot of stuff. And, but you know, I guess that's just it's just frustrating that the conventional model is still building, what, 90% of our
Yeah.
built environment here
Easily. Yeah.
easily. And
Hmm.
I guess I've just kind of almost accepted it's like almost you have to let that happen before you can come back and fix it in maybe 30 years or urbanize it,
Hmm.
in 30 years. It's almost like the old patterns of development where you would build, 1 story buildings down a main street, and then all of a sudden it made sense. Somebody built a 2 story building and made more money, and then everybody tore down the 1 story buildings. And
Hmm.
you just have to maybe go through that process, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's such a machine. All that stuff is such I mean, and so you have to envy it. It's an incredible machine, um, and the efficiency of it is amazing, and it makes a ton of money for people. If you get your timing right in the market. Of course, you could lose a ton of money if you get your timing wrong, um, but yeah, I always think about like I make the military analogy like so if you're somebody who cares about like traditional urban planning, it's like we fight hand to hand combat in our older neighborhoods, and we're really excited when we win a battle or two. In the meantime, it's like the enemy is carpet bombing, everything outside the older neighborhoods just at will, and we kind of willfully ignore it. Um, but yeah, it will continue on. I think as long as it can continue on, it seems to.
Well, it's, we're how many, it's the expected lifestyle.
Yeah,
There's no more generations. There's very few percentage of people that have not been raised in the suburbs.
yeah, exactly. It's been like 4 generations now. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's the normal. And driving, you know 25 minutes to go to your super Kroger or whatever
Hmm.
grocery store is normal for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, so like the last thing I wanted to ask you is, I mean, so you just mentioned you're working on this greenfield project in Oklahoma, and I know you well enough to know that you still work on some other greenfield projects here and there, but by and large, it seems like I might have the wrong impression about this. I fully admit that I could be wrong about it. You're more plugged into this world than I am, but it seems like there's a whole lot less of those greenfield new urbanist projects going on than there were, say, 20 years ago, um, across the country. And I don't know. I guess I wonder. Do you think that's wrong or right? And if that's the case, like what's going on? Why? I think we all thought that once, you know, Seaside and all those projects and then Kentlands, and once they were all 10, 15 years old and people saw how cool they were, that we would see like an explosion of these around the country. And that clearly hasn't happened.
Not exactly, no. And I think you're right. I think our expectations 20 years ago that we were going to change the machine, or if not the machine, at least my thought was always you would show the market there were alternatives.
Yeah.
Um,
And admittedly, we were like naive and idealistic. So, I mean, that was also part of it.
well, I'm still kind of that same naive, idealistic person in many ways, um, which is both pro and cons. But
Mm,
um, I think these projects have shown people that there all are alternatives, to living in the cul-de-sac, conventional neighborhood world. Um, and I think if you look at the market research, it shows you the prices in Kentlands, the prices in Ion, the prices in Norton Commons is significantly higher than its competitor that's a conventional thing, right next door or right
mm,
down the road. Um, but it also takes 10, 15 years to do something like that.
yeah.
And meanwhile, most of the development work it's easier to go to a DR Horton and be done in 3, 4 years, 5 years. You're done, right? And the
Yeah.
landowner got their money in the first year.
Yeah.
They didn't get as much money as they could have, but they got the first year and they're out. They're on to the next thing. Um, and I think there's just a perfect storm of all these variables there. Those are some of them. The time investment that it takes. I think you know we've all UI has stolen most of the good ideas of the new urbanism
Hmm.
that they can make sense of on a spreadsheet, right? And they've thrown all the other stuff away. So they have co-opted some things from us, but UIs, those folks are developing most of the stuff here. Not
Hmm.
the new urbanist group. NTBA is a fantastic group that I really enjoy spending time with. Um, but those are developers that are in 1, 2, 3, 4 places for 10 years, 15 years, or you can only do so much. Even the bigger, more sophisticated ones. Meanwhile, these other guys are just knocking down 10,000 houses a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
And while I think we kind of recognized how hard it was to do those first TNDs, 30 years ago, and I think it's gotten a little easier. It's still incredibly hard. Everything about it is incredibly hard, and you really have. It's kind of a unique personality of a developer who wants to take that on. and push for it, because you're going to be fighting. Even today, you're still going to be fighting so many battles to just execute even a mediocre uh, T&D.
And I think there's still a lot of greenfield work. I think you're seeing a little bit of obviously not many projects survived 2008, and
Yeah.
so you didn't see many come back online. It took a long time for them to come back online. And in some places, our Sailor project, which has virtually very little regulatory oversight, it took 3 years to get vertical, which is unheard of anywhere else.
Hmm.
Most places are still in their entitlements in year three.
Yeah.
It takes you 5 years to come out of the ground. Most places, um, it's a long investment, and again, the ULI guys are typically, a lot of those guys have to answer to the capital, and the capital's not that patient
Hmm.
generally. You know what I mean? They got to have a plan to, move so much, dirt or lots or whatever it is. Um, and they just can't wade into something for, 10, 15 years. It's hard,
Yeah.
I think, for that group to understand that. And I guess, that's, maybe something that we haven't never solved is how do you engage that industry in a different way. And you remember back to the New Urban Fund that was supposed to show them how to do it.
Yeah.
That didn't quite work. Um, so I don't know. It's that um, I I'm a market guy, so the market guys believe the market's going to kind of tell you what to do, and
Hmm.
they're going to go the easy route, but they're going to put in
Yeah.
the big pool and all the stuff that helps them increase their sales rate and all that kind of stuff. And it is what it is. But the people who do Trilith outside Atlanta, they're doing great. They're killing it. So
Yeah.
whenever we do these, Norton Commons continues to
Hmm.
kill it. Um, they just dominate the market. Once you do it, you can do it right.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to set up the machine in most cases, the industry to continue that. It's always been kind of a family or one off, or very few of these have been done by corporate folks. I guess just like watercolor, that
Right.
was that. There's been a few, but they quickly went back to
Yeah.
selling pine forest or whatever they were doing before that.
Yeah, exactly. Like St. Joe Company did watercolor and water sound and stuff, and they own so much land. And I think it seems like they've kind of gone away from that back to a hybridized version of what they were doing before.
Yeah,
So,
and it's so I don't know, man. And I do think if you look around, there's also a lot of smaller projects that we don't really hear about. If you call up like Mike Watkins or somebody like
mhm.
that, um, Mike's extremely busy, and that's what he's working on. He's working on these 100-acre little projects that he's nailing. And
Hmm.
we do a lot of work with Mike and like Tom Lowe and those guys. There's a lot of smaller projects that just you aren't going to hear about,
Interesting.
and they're never going to be. We've done some DPZ. We've got a DPZ project that's stuck entitlement in the entitlement process that we're set up to do some of the architecture on. But it's year 4,
Hmm.
and so they'll call us when they need us. But there's not as many getting the limelight that we used to get. And I just had this conversation with Rob Studeville, who
Hmm.
used to do one of my favorite things, which was write the New Urban News. I loved getting that magazine every month.
Hmm.
Remember?
Hmm.
Um, so it was good to catch up with him about that. But he had those same thoughts, and I just don't think maybe as a movement we're communicating what we're doing very well with
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
Nobody knows about my Sailor project.
Right.
It's probably one of the bigger ones. No, Mike doesn't. Mike will share stuff. When he needs one of us to come in and help him on stuff. But other than that, I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what DPZ or Dover Coal's doing, unless we're working on a specific project with them. So we really don't share as much as we used to.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. It's like uh, we could do a whole other hour sometime on how uh, CNU itself has changed and gotten away from a lot of the practical side of just building great communities. And I think a big part of that is we're not talking to each other about who's doing what. And we used to actually have a running list of all these places all over the country. I, I don't think that even exists anymore.
I don't think that's a priority
That
anymore.
doesn't seem to be.
But I think that CNU group has gotten away from communicating and with each other our successes, because that's
Yeah.
a large, because it kept you going.
Hmm.
We'd all go back to our little hometowns after a CNU, and I would feel renewed and re-energized, and I would I would love getting New Urban News in the mail, and whatever I
Right.
was doing, I would stop and sit down and read the thing, because it was great to hear about some new exciting stuff or some new projects, or um, and ironically, in an age where it's very easy to communicate these days, we don't
Yeah.
pat ourselves on the back, we don't share our success stories.
It's kind of like CNU never evolved, and communication wise, we never evolved past the email listserv. it's,
No, you're right. You're
it's kind of
exactly
hilarious.
you're
Uh,
100% right on that.
yeah.
It's the most painful way to communicate that's ever been invented, I think.
No doubt. No doubt.
Except maybe the group text. I don't know.
Yeah. Eric, I think we'll wrap it there. It's been about an hour. What's your favorite spots in Savannah? Your favorite hangout spots these days?
Hmm, that's a good question. Depends what my mood is. But you know, I've got a I've got a couple of establishments, 2 blocks from my house,
Mm-hmm.
that you're most likely to find me in one of those three places. You got
Mm-hmm.
the most famous dive bar in the world, Pinky's.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a place called Savoy, which is run by the people who own Pinky's, and I think that wasn't there when you were here, was it?
I don't remember it. No.
So that while you were here, it was this kind of shitty wine bar that nobody ever
Oh
went.
yeah, 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 yeah.
So it's in that space in the Drayton Tower,
Okay.
and it's you go in there and it's 95% locals,
Cool.
98%, something like that. So I hang out there, and then over by the Perry Lane Hotel,
Mm-hmm.
there's some stuff there. Those are my hangouts these days.
All right. So anybody listening, if you're in Savannah, you know where to find Eric. Buy him a drink and talk about all this stuff and much more, and find out what he's up to. So it's been great to catch up with you. I'll get my butt down there to Savannah one of these days soon, so we can dive a little deeper and do the off-color stuff. So,
Okay, good. I don't think you have to censor anything, so I was on my best behavior.
not this time. Yeah.
But I again just want to reiterate. I think it's great that you're doing this. This is a great way to communicate with folks. Again, we need to do kind of more of this stuff, and um, you know, I think, just to reiterate earlier, we accomplished a lot here, man. So I'm proud to have had you here as a Superman to my Batman, or whatever you want to term it. So
As
I
long
miss
as
you,
it's not Batman or Robin. So
I don't want to see you in tights. That would not be a pretty sight. But
nobody does. Nobody
miss you
does.
here, buddy, and appreciate you.
Thanks very much. I'm definitely miss you and miss Savannah. It's I need to find myself there more often. So good to talk to you.
All right, buddy.
See ya.